Reading, writing, and arrests seems to be the theme here at Liberty Christian School. I don't know if you've heard about this, Scott, but they're having some abuse problems over there.
Really? Again?
Yeah.
Well, not again, but them too, I guess, is a better way to say it. Yeah.
I know, but like aside from from book learning, there's been 4 victims that have been found. So this started off initially with a single victim that the police were investigating, the local sheriff's office. And then they discovered in their investigation 3 more victims. So we don't know how many more victims are going to be found in this.
Right.
But that's the situation. Of course, anybody for whom that's a trigger thing, kill the episode now, go on your merry way. We'll talk to you next time around.
Yeah.
Like you had said, like earlier, like Liberty Christian School, like what's with like the word liberty and just horrible, horrible Christian schools?
Yeah. Like the most oppressive schools in the United States all have the names like Freedom High and Liberty Catholic. It's like the most oppressive places to learn in the earth. Gosh.
Yeah, like I don't get it. And like the worst thing about this is like there's 2 people involved. There is the school secretary / homeschooling coordinator.
Right.
So and that will become a bit of a bad pun in a bit. But then also the principal of the school, who is also a teacher at the school and the school's pastor.
Jeez.
So both of these, this is the first victim, had accused both of them. This happened in the principal's home. So the victim was spending the night at the principal's home, in which the principal lived with his wife and the secretary of the school.
What?
Yeah, right. Like we're like straight up in freaking soap opera territory with this one. And
yeah.
I'm not going to recount any of the tales of horror. If anybody wants, go ahead and, search, Liberty Christian School abuse, and you'll find what you need to find. But like some of the accusations of abuse there are like, they're like grade A gnarly, like WTF things.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, with all the other things that we've seen, when it comes to abuse, like it doesn't really feel like the people are just making this up, especially when the investigators are the one, they found 3 more victims. It wasn't like people just, came forward, and now they're looking for more people to come forward, so like they have their information out there. So, if you happen to have gone to Liberty, like the sheriff's office wants you to contact them if you were a victim as well. Like, right. That's what this situation is.
Holy cow. Yeah, like where there's smoke, there's fire, right? And so if you scratch the surface and you find 3 more people that have been abused, like the minute that like you really get out a shovel, start digging, like all sorts of stuff's going to come out of the woodwork.
And it's not like we haven't covered issues of abuse. I mean, like just this past couple of days, the Southern Baptist Conference was like defending the cost of their abuse hotline.
Yeah.
And, so I guess it's like, I don't know if this school has anything to do with the Southern Baptist Conference or not, but like, it's like there's a need for, for these people to be able to, be safe.
Yeah. Leah, not to linger on the Southern Baptist thing for too long, but what kind of monster do you have to be to go a sexual abuse hotline? Is it worth the money? Like, how horrible do you have to be to have that thought,
You gotta be kind of just a nightmare of a human to have that thought.
Especially after your denomination has been raked through the coals for months over this scandal and the report that came from it. Yeah, but like there's all sorts, like, so coming back to this story again, like even with just the little bit that you've described, like red flags should be going up in everybody's mind everywhere. And when I say everybody, what I really mean to say is, all the other teachers and all the other staff and all the other parents and all the other students here at Liberty Christian School, red flags should have been going up in their minds like crazy. Like, hey, why does the principal and his wife have the secretary living with them? And why are students coming over to their houses for sleepovers?
So, like, you're asking bad questions because you're asking questions that, a person with an IQ above 10 should have asked ahead of time. I mean, this may be a weird example, but, Marquis de Sade wrote this wonderful little short story, and it's called, at least in the translation that I have, The Fortunate Ruse, right? And it's this husband who thinks his wife is cheating on him, And so he fake poisons himself and gets her to basically to get her to admit that like she had done this, but she on his supposed deathbed, right? Like she confesses that she acted inappropriately, but that nothing ever had happened. And then he springs up, he's like, oh, thank goodness, thank goodness. I know the Marquis de Sade's not the kind of person we think of when we think of like moral lessons.
Right.
But it's a great story for like saying, look, even giving the appearance of, bad behavior or like not giving like things like the appearance of being like at arm's length, like that's a problem.
Yeah. The Bible says that leaders and a school leader at a Christian school really has very little distinction from a church leader in the minds of a student. So our leaders are supposed to be above reproach is the way the Bible would say it. These are supposed to be men and women who have been tested, who have been through trials and have emerged to them. Words is hard.
Yes.
Having emerged from them, having made the right decisions, the hard decisions, the decisions that are in the best interest, in this case, the decisions that are in the best interest of the students.
Yeah.
And having a track record of having that maturity of thought and having that wisdom of experience to not fall into these pitfalls. It's like really frustrating to week after week unearth these stories of incredible failures of judgment, failures of character, I guess. Yeah.
I mean, it's a failure of just about, I think, everything in this, like everything possible in this system. Like we've talked about this before, right? So it's like when we ask a question like, how does this break the church?
Yeah.
It's kind of obvious at this point. At least I would hope that it's obvious. I mean, I think first and foremost, it's just disgraces Jesus, right? And when you're clearly doing things that are like uncool from biblical teaching, it's just going to makes the church look bad. It makes all believers look like they're, full of garbage. And it just makes people not trust the church. I don't know if there's anything you want to heap onto that pile.
The list is endless, right? You cannot preach a message of redemption while you are stepping on people. You cannot preach a message of healing when you are hurting people. When we talk about hypocrisy, it's not just that you say one thing and do the other. It's that in doing the other things, you are actually, in reality and in significant ways, making other people's lives worse. And that is actually the opposite of what the message of Jesus is. The message of Jesus is a redeeming message. It makes people's lives better.
And like I think one of the worst parts of this story is that like the principal at one point, allegedly had said to the first victim that this was okay for things to happen, but then that she shouldn't tell anybody about it, because people could get in trouble. And it's like that right there just speaks to like the issues of somebody when you have authority over somebody else, real or perceived, especially a teenager, words is hard. A teenager compared to the principal of the school, the pastor of the school. That sentence, like, this is okay, but don't tell anybody, like that girl should have just gotten up and fled out of there, right? But that's not what happens when somebody, like, you feel like you can't, push back against somebody else's authority.
Right.
And if that's how, people are executing their authority in the office in the church, like, what does that say about the authority of God?
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, I don't like nothing good.
There's no way around it, especially for a young mind. There is no way to unentangle the parallels a young mind is going to draw between the authority figure they see standing in front of them and God, right? In a lot of ways, they kind of become one and the same. And even if you can make the jump to say, this person is not God, you are always going to see elements of this person in that abstraction that you're trying to conceptualize,
Yeah, I mean, because when you have, I mean, especially like if this is in a certain vein of Christianity, like there is a strong obey your leaders teaching within
for sure
numerous branches of Christianity. We're kind of telling people it's like, yeah, like listen to your leaders, but don't just like obey them mindfully, obey them intentionally. I think, when we look at like, what can we do to be fixing this problem?
Yeah.
I mean, I say we, like you and me have any capacity to fix this, but like we as a church, I mean, there's so many things that can be done. But I mean, like we've said it before and we'll say it many, many times, accountability. Like there always needs to be that accountability. But then like this story just kind of seems to throw in another thing, like common sense, folks. Like this girl's parents should never have let her spend the night at the school principal's house.
Exactly.
I don't care who else is living there. It just should not have happened. Like, what would you do as a parent if like that came up with one of your kids?
Oh, I don't know that we can talk about such things on a family-friendly YouTube channel. I will just say that hopefully somebody smarter and wiser and more compassionate than I am has the mindfulness to call the police before I get involved.
Suffice to say, you're not going to like let your child, whichever, whatever gender they are, like spend the night at like, and this wasn't like a sleepover thing with like the principal's daughter who they're friends with. Like,
right.
There was no mention of any friends.
Yeah.
And I don't want to like shame anybody for having made the wrong decision, because we make crap decisions sometimes and bad things can happen.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we have an obligation, especially to protect our own children and to apply common sense.
Right.
And to ask those common sense questions like you asked, like what? When like you have the secretary of the school living with the principal and his wife. I mean, there may be an explanation for that, but none of the articles involved had that. But it's just like, this should have been something that people saw the potential for.
Yeah, I think the only thing I would want to add is COVID has really brought to the surface a lot of fears we never even realized we had, right? Mm-hmm. Like 5 years ago, nobody would even know how to vocalize the idea of, we don't have enough qualified teachers and administrators. How do we keep the school open, right? That was never even a concept. We don't have enough qualified nurses. How do we keep the hospital open? We don't have enough qualified whatever. How are we going to keep this thing going?
Yeah.
Look, sometimes you don't. Like, if you don't have the person who is not properly credentialed and doesn't have the character to lead a school of young girls, young boys, then maybe you close the doors instead of letting the inmates run the asylum. Mm-hmm. Because you're not just a school, you're a Christian school. If you fail to be the light of the world in your little school, then you haven't just failed your students, you've failed the kingdom. You know what I mean?
Severely.
And so we need to do a better job of knowing the ends doesn't justify the means. We don't keep the train rolling at all costs. Like sometimes you put the train in the train house and you just let it sit there.
I think that works.
It's just heartbreaking. I mean, it's hard to talk about these stories week after week, especially these stories, because they are so fundamentally heartbreaking. We are everywhere to everybody's chagrin, right? If you go to Twitter and say Church is Lame, you'll find us. If you go to Facebook, you'll find us. But I have noticed an uptick in recent weeks of stories of predominantly younger women who are telling their stories of abuse at the hands of Christian leaders. And it's so incredibly heartbreaking because men of integrity, men of God, their first instinct is to want to fix it and to want to make the bad people go away and to want to heal all the hurts of all these young girls. And you can't, right? We're not in these people's lives. And so all you can do is stew and pray and hope that people who are wise, people who are compassionate, people who have good judgment and are willing to do the hard things, do the hard, flippin' things. We are Church is Lame. Mark and I, we love the church, but we are absolutely convinced that churches and church leaders do crazy things that break the perception of the entire body. So if you have something you want to add, if you have your own story, we would love to hear it. We would love to interview you on the show, hear your story, hear how the church has failed you, and most importantly, hear your perception of what the church needs to do better, how the church could have been an agent of healing in your life. If you have that story, we would love to hear it. So please shoot us an email at churcheslamepodcast@gmail.com. And by all means, for everybody, feel free to leave a comment and click the thumbs up button, thumbs down button, like and subscribe and all those clicky things. And then, once again, if you're listening to the podcast, churcheslamepodcast@gmail.com.
And with that, go in peace and serve the Lord.
If you got something out of this episode, would you consider clicking on the super thanks below? And if you'd like to see more content just like this, would you hit the playlist Absence of Accountability?